Yo, what's going on everybody, this is Rocklan here, welcome back to a brand new video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to create your very own Valorant Blender Animations for your montages and edits. I've had a lot of requests to make this, so here it is. I said I was going to put it off for a couple weeks, but I thought I'll bang it out quickly as I'm going away next week and I won't have a video for that week. But yeah, I know a lot of people were having issues with this and I don't think there's any other tutorials out there at the moment, so I'm going to do my best to try and teach you the basics and go over it in a relatively beginner friendly way, as I know not many of you have much experience in Blender, and just teach you basically how to animate your characters and things like that. Just before we get started, I'd like to say I've made several other tutorials all revolving around Valorant montages and edits, After Effects tutorials, Premiere Pro tutorials, other Blender tutorials. I've got all sorts on my channel. Make sure you go check out any of those if you're interested, and also make sure you follow me on my other socials, TikTok, Twitter and Instagram at RocklanVL. And without any further ado, let's get into the video. What you're going to want to do is open up Blender. I'm using version 2.8 as I expect you will be, because that's the latest version. Apart from beta versions, obviously you can get 2.9, but I'm going to be showing you in version 2.83 exactly. And all you're going to want to do is then just click anywhere on the screen to remove this little dialog box, double tap W and select everything and press delete. Now you'll be left with this completely empty canvas, and I'm just going to go through some quick basics of moving around in case you've never used Blender before. So basically you're going to press the middle mouse button to move around like this. That's just to rotate around the center point. If you hold shift and the middle mouse button, that will allow you to move side to side. If you hold control and the middle mouse button, you'll be able to zoom in and out. You can also use scroll wheel to do that. And a couple other things which I do recommend when you're learning how to move around in Blender is if you come up to your edit and preferences and come here to key map and you search for walk, and you'll see here view navigation walk fly. Bind this to Shift F, and that way if you ever get into any awkward positions where you're stuck moving the camera around, you can just press Shift F. It's going to put this crosshair in the middle of your screen, and then you move your mouse around and use WASD just like you would in a video game, so you can fly around and view your character this way. And I think this is one of the most beginner friendly ways to go about doing it. And you can scroll wheel in to make it move faster and scroll wheel out, and then it's going to make it slower, just like that, as you can see. Okay, so now you know some basics about moving around in Blender. It's time to import our models. So you're going to want to come up to File, Append, find your model pack that you're using. If you want to use my one, I highly recommend it. You can go into the description and find the link for that. It's also going to be the card in the top right corner, as well as you can see the thumbnail for that video on screen right now. It includes all the agents, including the up-to-date Killjoy models, as well as all the guns as well. So all you're going to want to do is just download that. It's just a zip file, and you extract it, and then you're going to go into that folder, go into Agents, find Jet or whichever model you want to use. I'm going to be using Jet for this tutorial. Double click it, go to Collection, choose the collection and hit Append, and then you'll see our model will be brought into our viewport. Now what you're going to want to do is zoom in and just position yourself so you get a clear idea of what you're actually working with, and come up to the top right and change it from the solid view to the material view, and you'll be presented with the textures just like that, as you can see. Now a few things just to check before we start animating or doing anything is that if you come over here to the render tab, make sure your render engine is on Eevee. We want to use Eevee for animations, not cycles, unless you have a really good PC. Eevee is going to be much faster for rendering animations. If you're doing a still image, so for a thumbnail or something like that, then use cycles, but for an animation you're going to want to use Eevee, as it renders a lot faster and you're not going to have to sit here and wait for 10-20 hours for, you know, a 1 or 2 minute animation to render. You can render it in, you know, 10 minutes just like that. And we're going to leave all these settings as default. If you'd like me to make a separate render settings video, then I will do that. I'm thinking of turning this into a video series anyway, as it's going to be really hard to cover everything in one video. So if you'd like that, leave a thumbs up on the video and let me know in the comment section below. Another thing I recommend you do is select the bones. Come down here to the armature settings, come down here to viewport display and change display as stick to display as octahedral, and I just find that this is a lot easier when it comes to animating a character. I don't really like the stick bones, I quite like to use these. And now we can get ready to start animating. So I presume one of the first things that you're going to want to do is add a weapon to your scene and put it in your character's hand. So for that, all you're going to want to do is come up to File, Append, go back, navigate back to the weapons folder in my model pack, and choose a weapon that you want to use. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to be going with the Sheriff, just down here, sheriff.blend, open that collection, revolver SO is what the collection's called, and just hit Append, and you'll see the revolver has now been added to the scene just down here. Now in order to attach the gun to the model's hand, which is going to make it a lot easier when it comes to animating, because you don't have to constantly be moving the gun into the character's hand, there's a quick trick which you can do where we parent the gun model to one of her hand bones so it will constantly move wherever her hand goes. In order to do that, you're just going to want to press Shift A. You'll see I've just turned on my screencast keys in the bottom left so you can see exactly what I'm doing at all times. Press Shift A and come down to where it says empty and choose plane axis. and you'll see there's now this this sort of axis that's shown up right here, and you just want to press S and scale that down so it's just the size of the grip of your gun, and make sure that it's positioned in the center of your grip. Obviously if your gun doesn't appear in the scene with the grip at the center, then obviously move it so that the axis is in the center of your gun. You can do that by using these two controls up here. You've got the move tool, which will allow you to move it on different axes, and you've also got the rotate tool, though I wouldn't recommend rotating this axis, just leave it straight. And then all you want to do is select the bone structure of the gun you're using, hold shift and select the axis just like that, so you can see we've got them both selected, and we're going to press Ctrl P and click object, and that means that now wherever this axis goes, if I move this around like this, the gun's going to follow it. In order to put the gun in our hand, select the axis, come over here to the constraints tab, hit add object constraint, child of, click the target, choose your agent scale mesh.ao. You don't want to go with this one as that's actually the mesh, you want to go with the armature, and you're going to hit bone, and you're going to find the name of a bone in her hand. So for example, I want to put it in her left hand, so if I select the bones and then I come up here from object mode, change to pose mode, you'll see I'll now be able to select the individual bones, and I want to parent it to this green one right here, as that's basically going to stay still the entire time. So if I click it and then come down here to this bones properties panel, you can see the name of it. So it's called L elbow twist 3. So I'm going to come back into object mode, grab the axis, go back to the constraints, child of, select the armature, bone, I'm going to find L elbow twist 3, and when I click that, you'll see the gun will suddenly jump up into her hand. If I quickly hide the bones, you can hide things by pressing H, and then if you press Alt H, it'll bring it back. So I'm just going to press H to hide the bones just for the time being, so it's a little bit easier to see, just like that. And you can see the gun's now jumped to her hand. I'm now going to position it obviously in her palm. So you can do that just by grabbing the axis, grabbing the move tools, or you can just press G and then the axis you want to move it on. So if I press G and Z, I'll be able to move it down just like that. So I'm going to move it into a hand just like this and position it something just like that, right in the palm of our hand, just like that. Of course, you can go back into pose mode and you can start moving these bones. So you can wrap her fingers around the gun if you like, just like this. I'm not going to bother, but if you want to, you can do. That's good enough for the sake of this tutorial. I'm just trying to give you the basics, otherwise we'll be here forever. So obviously spend some time wrapping her fingers around the gun just like that. I'll go more over positioning and posing in a minute, but just for the time being, that's the simplest way to do it. And then we can just grab the bones of our gun and press H, and also grab the axis and press H, and we don't need to worry about any of that anymore, and we can just leave it just like this. So you can see we've now got the gun stuck in our hand. If we go into pose mode and position her, so for example if we grab the elbow bone and we rotate it, you can see that the gun is stuck in her hand and it's not going anywhere, and it just makes it a lot easier than having to move the gun every single time we move her arm. Now it comes to actually animating your character. So just before we start animating, I want to make it a lot easier for you guys, as I know a lot of you are beginners. If you're not, you can skip this step, but just to stop any confusion, I want to make this as basic as possible. So in order to move her bones, you're just going to select the bone structure, change from object mode, pose mode, and it's going to give you the option to select and move any of these bones. Some bones will be awkward to find, so for example, if I wanted to move her elbow, you can see there's two bones here. There's a red one and a green one inside of each other, and the way you can tell the difference is if you select one and it's got all these lines joining between the different bones, you'll know that that's the one that actually controls the whole arm. Whereas if I select the green one, you can see it's just on its own and it does weird things like this. So for ease of use, what you can do is just select the green one and press H and just hide it, and I'm going to do that for both elbows just like that. I'm also going to do it for all of our hand bones as well. So if I select these and press H, and select those and press H, and we don't need any of our facial bones either, so I'm going to get rid of those. We don't need these collarbone parts either, we'll get rid of those. In here you'll see this is actually moves her collar, you'll see like that, so we can hide that as well. And now we've got her neck controls, and basically I'm just going through and hiding every bone that's unnecessary. So this one for example, I'm never going to need to keyframe that, so I'm just going to get rid of that, and do the same on the other side, and do the same in the legs as well, get rid of that as well. Some bones like these are actually useful for moving exterior clothing items, so we're going to leave those, but the ones that are inside other bones that we really don't need, like these, I'm just going to hide. And you can see it makes it a lot easier to now find the bones that we're looking for first time. If you have any confusion, you can just select the bone structure, come down to the armature options, viewport display and you can tick names, and you'll now see the name of every bone next to it if you need help with that, but I'm sure the majority of it's self-explanatory and you can just figure it out on your own. And yeah, that just makes it a lot easier when it comes to moving bones and making sure that you're finding the right ones every time. So I'm also just going to get rid of these as well, as we don't really need those. And there you go, you can see I've now hidden all the unnecessary bones. Now it's time to start animating. And before we start animating, you're going to want to change this window over here to the dope sheet. So if you just select this up here, and you're going to change it from a properties window to a dope sheet, and you're going to get a screen that looks somewhat like this. And I'll go through what this is in a minute when we start animating. And you're also going to want to make your timeline slightly bigger so you can see what's going on. And we're going to leave this up here as our outliner, as it makes it easier to find bones if we get lost. So for example, if I wanted to find the splitter bone, you can see this is right in the middle, and that's what we're going to be using to move the character after we've created our walk cycle. So it just makes it easier to find specific bones that we're looking for if we can't locate them on the mesh already. But I'll go through all of that when we get there, and like I said, I'm probably going to have to make this a tutorial series, as it's going to be impossible to cover in just one video. So what I'm going to animate now is just a very basic walk cycle. Now what I'm going to do is just roughly run you through how to keyframe in Blender, what keyframes are, and how to animate exactly. Let's say for example you wanted to move this elbow. So we're in pose mode so we can access every bone, and let's say I wanted to have the elbow start off like this. So I'm just going to select the bone that I want to make a change to, and I'm going to press I, and I'm going to select down here, you'll see lock rot, and that stands for location and rotation. So I'm going to be keyframing the location of this bone as well as the rotation of this bone. So I'm going to tick that, and you'll see down here on our timeline we've got this little yellow diamond, and that basically means that we've added a keyframe. And you can see over here in the dope sheet, the L elbow, which is the name of this bone, has a keyframe at the number 1 frame. So these numbers along the top are the frame numbers. So you can see we're going from 1 all the way to 250, and at frame 1 there is a keyframe for the elbow, telling Blender exactly what position and rotation this bone is going to be in. Now we can go forwards, say 10 frames, we can grab it and we can rotate it like this, and if we make sure the bone's selected, press I again and do location and rotation, you'll see now between these 2 points on our timeline, the arm's going to animate just like this. So if I press the little play button here, you'll see that's what we've animated so far. Now something quickly to bear in mind is every keyframe in Blender is automatically put onto a simple Bezier curve, and if you've watched any of my After Effects tutorials, and you'll probably know what a Bezier curve is, but if you don't, I'll show you. You come over here and change to the graph editor. You'll see right here, if we zoom in, I'll make a separate tutorial on the graph editor. I don't want to overwhelm anyone right now, so I'm just going to go through this briefly just so you have a simple understanding of what's going on. And you'll see right here, this curve right here is telling Blender that basically you can see it's in every rotation origin. These curves mean that the animation is going to start slow, speed up, and then slow down again. So if we play this through slowly, you can see it gradually gets faster to the middle point and then will slow down to the last couple movements. It's kind of hard to see over 10 frames, but if I drag it out to say 30 frames, you can see it starts off slow, gets faster, and then slows down towards the end. And that's just something to bear in mind when it comes to making realistic human movements. I'll go over the graph editor in another video and how to change it so that all movements are smooth and things like that. But if you want your movements to not be on a Bezier curve, all you have to do is select all the keyframes, right click, change interpolation mode to linear, and you'll see the lines are now straight, and that means that the animation will not change speed throughout the whole thing. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to leave everything on a Bezier curve. You can get away with that just fine, but just something to note, and I'll probably mention this again in a future video. So I'm just going to come back to the dope sheet, and we're going to ignore the graph editor for the time being, as I don't want to overcomplicate things for the moment. So I'm just going to delete all these keyframes just like that and put everything back to how it was when we started, and I'm basically going to animate a simple walk cycle. And what a walk cycle is an animation where your character will walk almost like it's on a treadmill. It will do a walking animation but staying in one spot, and then later on we'll make it move. And the benefits of a walk cycle is you can copy and paste the keyframes over and over and over and over again, so you can have an infinite walk, and you only have to keyframe 4 or 5 different poses and you can walk infinitely, rather than having to make adjustments to the location every single time. We can just loop this cycle and then move the character later, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Just stick with me here. So before I animate everything, I like to press A A to select all the bones and press I and then select location and rotation, just so that on our first keyframe you can see every single bone over here in our dope sheet has a keyframe on it. Now this is going to start to look confusing, but trust me, it's really not difficult once you can wrap your head around it. What we've done here is put a keyframe on every single bone that we've got selected here in that exact position and rotation to start with. That's literally all we've done. You can see nothing's changed, there's no animation, no nothing. We've just set a keyframe for all of these bones in the default position. Now what I'm going to do is go forward 3 frames. You don't have to go forward 3 frames, you can go forward 10 frames, you can go forward 5 frames, it doesn't really matter. 3 is going to be quite a fast walk, but I can always slow it down later and I'll show you how to do that. But I'm going to go forward 3 frames, and what I'm also going to do is tick this little box right here, which is auto keying. So if you select that, basically any movement we make, so for example if I move this arm right now, it's automatically keyframed it. You can see right here the left elbow has automatically had a keyframe added for it, so this animation has already been applied. And this is useful for when you make changes to the location and rotation of bones and forget to add the keyframe. It will automatically do it for you, so you don't end up wasting a ton of time. So I'm just going to undo that quickly, and there you go, you can see we're back to normal and I'm on frame 3. So to make it easier for you guys to make a walk cycle, I've created some reference images which you can see on screen right now, just of the different positions that you need both front and side for making a walk cycle. So you can literally copy these. I'll leave links to all these images in the description, just simple references that I created earlier, so that you have a basic understanding of how a walk cycle works, and you can basically copy what I'm doing in this video. As I don't want to spend ages keyframing all of this, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but I'll show you how to do the first position or so, and then these images will be left in the description so that you can rinse and repeat my steps and get a functional walk cycle. But basically all I'm going to do is look at my reference images and move my bones into those positions, like so. So you can see I've got a side profile and a front profile, and all I'm going to do is come into Blender, make sure I've got my num lock on, and I'm going to press 3, and that's going to put me in a front view, and 1 is going to put me in a side view. If you don't have a numpad, you can come up to your edit, preferences, key map, and you can change all of the key binds in here. If you go to key binding and I search for say 3, you can see here view axis numpad 3. You just want to change that to another key that you actually have on your keyboard, and that way you'll still be able to follow along. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the front profile first, and I'm going to pull up my first image, but it's going to be on my second monitor, and I'm basically going to copy exactly what I've done on there. You'll see I left all of the bones on there enabled, just in case you haven't bothered to hide any like mine. I didn't want to have ones missing or something like that in case you thought you had a different model or anything like that. I want to keep this as basic as I possibly can, and all I'm going to do is match that position. So I can see I have the pelvis tilted slightly to the left, so I'm going to find the pelvis bone, which I believe is this one. I'm just going to double check. That's the splitter pelvis. Make sure I have the pelvis bone selected, and I'm just going to move it to the left slightly, just like I have in that image. And I've also got this top spine rotated slightly to the right, so I'm going to do something just like that. If I jump back into forward view, that looks the same as in my reference image. And I'm also going to grab her neck and rotate that as well, just like that, so she's looking straight on, and tilt her head down slightly. And I'm going to point her legs so that they're facing forward, so if I do something like that. So if I jump to front view, that should look pretty similar to my other one. I also want to bring them in slightly, as I think her legs are slightly too far apart. And there you go. I'm matching my front reference photo as far as the front view goes. The rest of the changes I'm going to have to make on the side view. You can see over here the keyframes have automatically been added for the bones that we've been moving, and I'm also just going to tilt her feet in slightly so that they're not out sideways. Make that straight like that, and do the same for that one as well. And now what I'm going to do is jump into the side view, and I'm going to copy what I've got on my second reference image, which is this one, pull that on my second monitor, and I'm going to copy what I've done on there. So I've got her arms slightly forwards like that, and the elbow something just like that, and I think I have it across her chest a bit as well. There we go. I'm going to start doing her legs as well, so I'm going to bring this one forward slightly, the knee down a bit, and tilt her foot to something like that, and do the same for the back leg, something just like that, and the knee, and lift her foot up a bit like that. And then I'm going to grab the splitter bone, which is basically her center bone and controls every other bone. I'm just going to drag it down so that she's standing on the floor. I think I need to move this leg back a little bit as well, something like that. I think I'll bring her spine forwards a bit as well, something like that. And I think that's good for our first walking position. And as you can see over here, we've stayed on the third keyframe, and all the bones that we've changed, so our foot, knee, hip, foot, knee, hip on the left side as well. Pelvis, elbow, shoulder, clavicle, other shoulder, everything has been keyframed over here automatically. So I think that looks good. It matches my reference images, and I'm just going to go forward 3 frames. Oh, as you can see in Blender, you always start on the first frame, so I made a mistake actually. I'm going to go forwards 1, 2, 3, and just drag all of these keyframes which we already made onto frame 4, and then go forward 1, 2, 3 to frame 7. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3 frames different, and 1, 2, 3. If I play the animation for you quickly from side view, you can see she goes from the default pose into the first step, and then on frame 7 the leg's going to swing forward and she's going to start to take another step. So I'm just going to skip to the point where I've keyframed her first step. Okay guys, so as you can see, I've now added all of the keyframes I need over on this dope sheet. As you can see, I've also deleted any of the extra keyframes down the bottom that we didn't need, just to make it easier and more digestible for you guys to see. You'll probably have extra ones down the bottom, don't worry about that, it's completely normal, but I've just cleaned it up a little bit, which just makes it a little bit easier for me to explain what's going on. But your animation should look exactly the same as mine. You'll just have a few extra dots down the bottom, but don't worry about that. So as you can see, if I play through my animation, you can see she walks just like that all the way to the end and ends up back in the same position that we started with, just like that. You can see these 2 frames, frame 4 and frame 28, are exactly the same. So if I play the animation by pressing spacebar, you can see it's just a simple walk cycle, and then she just stands still for the rest of the animation. And from a front view, this is what it looks like. If you want to get a more accurate representation of the speed of her walk, if you change over to the solid view, you'll hopefully get a higher frame rate, and you can also hide the bones by pressing this little show overlay icon here. And now if I hit space, you'll see a more accurate representation of the speed that she's walking. For something like this, we've only done this at 24 FPS. So for example, if I show you, if I come back to the properties and go to the output properties, you'll see here frame rate is 24. We can bump this up to 60 if you want. You don't really need to. You can just stay at 30 FPS for animations. It's up to you. If you want to go to 60 for extra smoothness, then you can. It'll just take twice as long to render. But if you're rendering with Eevee, it's not really that big of a deal. I normally render at 60, but depends on the kind of PC you're working with as well. But you'll see if we bump it up to 60, and if I go back to the dope sheet, if I play it now, she's going to walk a lot faster. You can see just like that. It's now playing at almost or just over twice the speed. It's gone from playing 24 frames every second to now playing 60. So she's going to run over twice the speed. Ideally, you set the frame rate before you start animating, but if you don't, it's not that big of a deal. Or if you want to change the speed of her run later, so for example, even if it was at 24 FPS and you set the frame rate correctly before you started, you think she was walking or running too slowly, you don't have to individually drag every keyframe across. You can just come to the first keyframe of your walk cycle. So for me, this is obviously her default pose. You then come to the first frame of the walk cycle, just select all of these keyframes just like that. You'll see that will select them all, and then you press S on your keyboard and you'll be able to drag them out like this. So I could drag them out like that, and that will now make her walk a bit slower, just like that. You see, I can make that even longer if I want. So we'll go out to something like that, and you can see now it's at 60 FPS and she's walking quite slowly. I'm just going to go back to 24 for the sake of this tutorial. It doesn't really matter what frame rate you use, just depending on which frame rate you use depends on how far apart you'll have to put your keyframes, but I'm just going to stick at 24 as that's what I've used already. So if I play this through, you'll see that's what it looks like, and it's pretty much exactly the same when we go back to material view. There shouldn't really be a difference in frame rate. If we turn this off, you'll see up here the frame rate that it's running at when we play the animation. You see there 1920. It's dropping 2 frames or so, but it's pretty good. Now to loop this animation, so you know when you play it, it doesn't just continue going. You're just going to want to drag this out a bit further so you can see a bit more, and you can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out on the dope sheet just like this, and hold the middle scroll wheel to go back and forwards. And if you just select all the keyframes of your walk cycle, so you're not going to want to grab this first one, you just want to grab everyone after that, just like this, and press Ctrl C, and then come to the end and press Ctrl V, and you'll see now if we play the walk cycle, it just continues to loop. The reason we place it over this last frame on 28 is because this frame and frame number 4 are exactly the same. If we were to place it 3 frames after this last one, if I paste it here, you'll see she's now going to freeze here. Look, freezes and then carries on walking. You don't have to bother making this last frame. I didn't. I kind of cheated a little bit and just copied these keyframes across because I couldn't be bothered to remake the position. You don't really need to. You can get rid of this if you want. It actually looks a bit funky now that I've removed those last keyframes, but yours ideally won't look like that. And you can just grab all of these keyframes and just paste them. So we go 1, 2, 3, make sure we're on 28, and just paste them. Come to the end, 1, 2, 3, paste them. You'll see now she'll just basically infinitely walk until the end of it. The reason I like to keep this last keyframe, the reason I like to keep these keyframes on the end is just so that she finishes in a more natural position. So if I copy these across now, you'll see when she's done with the walk cycle, she'll just finish in a more natural position. Just like that, you'll see. But of course, you'll then want to go into whatever your next animation is going to be. And now that you know the basic principles of how keyframes and things like that work, you'll be able to animate other things like peeking around corners or crouching or jumping or all sorts of things. Now that you understand the basics of how keyframing works. Like I said, I'll probably make this a tutorial series and go over different techniques, so shooting weapons, adding flashes, muzzle flares, things like that, as well as the render settings and other things like that. But for the final thing for our animation, we need to actually make her go places. So in order to do that, you just want to make sure you're in pose mode, come up to the model. So come to pose, skeleton, root, you'll see root here. And then all we're going to want to do is come to the first frame of your walking animation. So that's not going to be the one where she stood like this. It's going to be the first frame of the actual animation. And then you're just going to press I and location rotation to add a keyframe for that, and you'll see the root has now got a keyframe added. And we're going to go to the end of the walk cycle, so mine's going to be about here, and we're just going to grab the move tool, or you can press G and then X, and that's going to allow you to move along an axis, and you're just going to drag them out to the point where you think the walk cycle is going to end. So I'm going to go about here, and as long as you have the auto keying on, it's going to make a keyframe on that final position. Now what you're going to want to do is just drag out your dope sheet again, select this last keyframe along the root bone, select the first one which we added, select the last one which we added, right click and change the interpolation mode to linear. That means that the speed is not going to change throughout the entire walk, which we don't want. We don't want her to start walking slowly, speed up, speed up, speed up, and then slow down. We want to make sure it's a constant speed the whole time, as we haven't changed the speed that she's walking accordingly, so she's going to look a bit weird and start sliding along the floor. By making that linear, it means it's going to maintain the same speed the entire way across. And now, pretty much all we need to do is just watch our animation back, press 1 on my numpad, and we're just going to want to make sure that she's not sliding across the floor. So if I swap back to solid view, just to make sure that we're getting maximum frame rate. And if I hit play, she's walking, walking, walking. And I think that actually looks pretty good, to be fair. I think we've kind of banged it first time. Let's see what it looks like from this sort of perspective. Okay, she might be sliding a little bit. So all we're going to want to do is just find our last keyframe over here. Just make sure that we're on it. Select the root and then just drag it back slightly. We'll see what that looks like. I think that's actually worse, to be honest. I think about there looks good. Of course, you can play around with this as much as you want. And as you can see, she is now walking from one place to another, just like that. If we look at that in material view, you'll see that is what it looks like. Super duper simple. Of course, you can infinitely loop this walk cycle. Like I said, just copy and paste the keyframes across every time and increase the distance that the agent's going to walk. And that pretty much does it for basic animation. The only thing we have left to do now is to add our camera. So in order to do that, go back to our first frame. So make sure on frame 1, you can just type it in down here. So you see if I type 20, it will jump to 20. Just put it on 1. And we're going to want to press Shift and A and then choose camera. And press 0 on our numpad. If you don't have a numpad, you can go Edit, Preferences, Key Map and rebind it. And then press Shift F, which is what we bound earlier. And now we're going to use WAS and D to position our camera. So I'm just going to come up and position our camera somewhat like this. You can literally position it however you like. I'm just going to go for something like that. I think looks good. And then what I like to do is come to the properties panel, choose the object properties and just clean up some of these values. So you can see rotation X 88, I'll just make that 90, make that 0, make that 0, make the Z location down a little bit so that she's centered like that. And there you go. We've now got a camera set up. So you'll see if we go back to the dope sheet, you'll see our camera is up here and it has got keyframes automatically added for the position. You can see there are keyframes here. And now all we're going to want to do is go to the end of our animation or wherever you want the camera to end up. And I'm just going to go back to our properties and drag the location X across to where I want the camera to end, so somewhere like that. And now if we go back to the dope sheet, you'll see a keyframe has been added automatically at frame 100, which is the end of our animation. And that's now keyframed the camera, so it's going to start here and it's going to move along with her just like that. And you'll see the speed is going to vary, as like I explained at the beginning of the video, everything is automatically put on a simple Bezier curve. So you'll see the camera is going to start off slow, speed up, speed up, speed up, and then slow down and almost stop, just like that. If you want to change that, like I said earlier, back to the dope sheet, select the last keyframe and the first one, doesn't matter what order you selected in, and then just right click, interpolation mode, linear, and that way now the camera will not change speed as it starts going and basically stay in the same position the whole way across. You don't have to use this. I quite like my camera on a Bezier curve like that, and I'm also going to position it a bit more somewhere like this, and you'll see that's automatically updated my keyframe. So now if I play back through the camera, you can see it's going to do this sort of maneuver just like that. Now that actually looked really terrible, so I just added another keyframe in the middle to position it here. And as you can see now, if I play this back, the camera's going to just do a simple animation just like that. Nothing too crazy. Obviously you can do whatever you want. You can have this flying out windows, you can have it zooming around corners, you can have it rotating, doing all sorts of stuff. But just for the sake of this tutorial, to keep it simple, something just like that will do. And you need a camera, as that's what the perspective of your actual render will be. And there you go. That is our very simple Valorant animation. If you guys enjoyed or found this video useful, please make sure you leave a thumbs up on it and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to turn this into a video series, as I literally just covered the basics in this video. Make sure you check out some of my other tutorials on my channel as well, all revolving around Valorant editing, montage making, everything like that. Follow me on my socials at RocklanVL on TikTok, Twitter and Instagram. And other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.